Welcome back to Psychology of Peacebuilding. Last week you were assigned to watch the documentary that came out after the first mass school violence tragedy at Columbine years ago. I was actually teaching at the University of Denver at that time, and I was teaching some of the students whose lives were horribly impacted by that school violence. If you have not taken the time to view that documentary, my students who do see it, I look at your syllabus, it will give you directions, look at Canvas, your module, to find it and view it for free. They say they are pretty disappointed and discouraged that the adults, the politicians, the government workers, the school leaders of the United States have not been doing more to take on this challenge. And sad but true. But there are, mothers who have lost loved ones and others, Gabby Gifford and her husband from Arizona, who have really fought hard for positive change. So I don't want you to be too depressed or discouraged. But it's a wonderful opportunity to be applying all the material that you've learned in this course to see how it works when analyzing, assessing a toxic society, which is full of multiple toxic systems. What I want to talk about first this week is restorative justice. I have introduced this to you, and I want to talk a little bit about our retributive, and I don't like calling it justice because I see it as an injustice system. It has absolutely created injustice against people of color, especially men, in this society. And if you were in my restorative justice course, you would be seeing the tale of the world champion boxer, Hurricane Carter, and how he was wrongly prosecuted and imprisoned for most of his life. This happens way too often in this society, and racism, sexism are all also entrenched, tough, toxic systems to transform. But I have faith in all of you. You're going to do it, right? And part of how you're going to do it is in Living Inspiration, I'm introducing you to speaking truth to power persuasive skills, which I've been using my whole career. We have to be able to speak truth to power and persuade across difference in this world. We can't just persuade our best friends and loved ones, right? We have to be prepared to do it with everyone. And restorative justice is another process I teach that I really believe in. Now, and I'd like to briefly introduce it today. Now, our criminal justice system, yeah, I'll call it criminal, is based on punishment and control, top-down authority, what Gerd Hofstede refers to as masculine culture, the dictatorships of the world, the Putin society. Putin grew up on the streets. He was very much a criminal. He became one of the Secret Service police. And Russia, sadly, I believe, has history of the most horrific genocide against one's own people that has existed in history. But Hitler was another. This is the basic philosophy of the U.S. criminal justice system. If you punish people and you kill people, somehow there'll be, I would say, revenge. I don't see that as justice, because what research shows is that if we raise our children by ignoring them most of the time, and slapping them, throwing them across the room, punishing them if they misbehave, we are teaching them to be violent human beings. They will follow our example. So why would it be any different with the U.S. criminal justice system? We are teaching people to be career criminals. That is what we have been doing, and we've been doing it in a highly, darkly unjust way to keep people down, to keep people in their place. I mean, it's all very perverse, the kind of thinking that goes on. And that's not our focus in this course. But I want to introduce it to you because if we continue to glorify and prioritize that approach, I don't see how we'll ever transform our society into a healthier, multicultural, interfaith democracy. And our police are in the center of this by being unjust, and we are seeing more and more examples of this with body cams and concerned bystanders videotaping police brutality. The police must somehow be transformed and held accountable for being just. Or there's really no hope, is there? Unless we leave the society, we leave the country, which some of you may decide to do. Now, restorative justice has been a movement in my lifetime to challenge this retributive system and to transform it. Victims are actually the ones that first spoke out, and they said, we want a greater voice in what happens when we have been harmed. We don't, now obviously, these aren't, the rape victims that are afraid of speaking up against their rapists because they're afraid of being re-traumatized within the criminal justice system. That's a whole nother discussion. But these are victims, and sometimes these were victims whose families were murdered, who said it's not okay for the state to take over, for government to take over and to exclude me. I want a voice. And some of them were courageous and strong enough to say, I want to talk to my offender. I want to talk to the person who has harmed me. I want to ask them questions about what they did to me. And bravo for them, right? A lot of us are not going to make that choice when we're harmed, but some of us will, and it's transformative. Now, most offenders do not take responsibility for the harm they've done, but some do. Some feel great remorse, maybe after spending time in prison, they want to make amends. And so these two groups of people are very rich people to come together in a victim-offender encounter to negotiate repair of harm and make amends. And we're just starting to see this happen. Now, concerned family and community come together as well. I am a victim offender mediator. I have been working with first-time juvenile offenders. Since before I came to California, I started this work in Colorado, and I really believe in this intervention for young people. Gang members, non-gang members, whatever, first-time juvenile offenders. What the research has shown is this is the most powerful way of helping them make amends, return to their families and communities, and start making different choices. So I will be teaching a GE in restorative justice for the remainder of the time I'm teaching. I really believe in it, and I hope you take some time after being introduced to it here to learn more. Now, I think that's enough for an introduction. If you want to learn more, I've listed some books, and Holding These Truths will give you a bit more. Thanks for listening. Okay, now we're going to go to the Nasty Tactics PowerPoint.
Okay, but this is still the same course, right?
It is the same course. It's lecture 2.
Lecture 2.
It's
okay,
week, it's week, what is it, 13, lecture 2.
Roger that. Okay, we can go in 5, 4, 3.
Welcome back to Psychology of Peacebuilding. For the next couple of weeks, I will not be doing any new introduction of material. We will be focused on review. So in my closing formal lecture today, I want to focus on what I recommend you do in the face of someone who's really nasty, because we all go through nasty encounters, hopefully not on a daily basis, hopefully not in your own family. Yes, in my birth family, I did go through this, but I'll tell you now that I don't need to live with my father, my brothers and sisters. They taught me a lot about what I'm teaching you. So I will say today I'm grateful for the learning, but at the time it was pretty tough. Nasty tactics, what I recommend for psychology of peace building. First of all, let me turn to a PowerPoint. Stay focused on you. Now, some of you, if there are women listening, and I know there are, you have not been raised to prioritize taking care of and protecting yourself. Please do. Learn how to prioritize taking care of yourself and your own needs first. You know, as children, we're dependent on other people to care for us. But we're not that old, actually, when we learn to walk away and find safe people and safe spaces and figure out how to stay away and out of the nastiness, right? If you haven't learned how to do that, if you haven't been able to do that, hopefully Dominguez will be your time, right? Stay focused on, okay, what do I need? Nastiness, once you've lived as long as I've lived and worked with so much conflict, it tells you a lot about the nasty person, how miserable they are, how, maybe how abused they've been in their life, what a lack of conflict resolution, civility, peace building skills, experience they have, but it is not a mirror of you. That is something you need to realize. Don't take it personally. It's not personal. I'll tell you, the most successful people I've known, and I've known the whole range of civilization, of wealth, power, success, the truly successful people will be respectful. It's the pretenders, the fakers, that give us all problems as they're trying to throw their weight around. So stay focused on taking care of yourself. Now, there is international research of negotiation that you have to be able to be a little nasty yourself to show opponents that you cannot be bullied, right? So I prefer to walk away. I'm not really enthused about being nasty, reciprocating in kind, going low with somebody, but you understand that you do need to show the person who's trying to abuse or bully you that you can't be abused or bullied, okay? And how you do that is up to you. I tend to walk away. Sometimes I stay quiet, and that works really well for me. I don't give them a reaction. And that is not easy. Most of our all human primitive brains are survival wired, and they will react with fight, flight, or freeze. That's in us, and that mechanism is actually important for survival. So I don't think you want to get rid of that. That's valuable information inside, but keep it within. You don't want to be giving your opponent, anybody who's nasty, the power or satisfaction of your cowering, of your giving in, of your even fighting or getting angry. That also is a reaction. In order to actually learn not to react, I'll tell you my tips. We have to build strong inner strength. We have to have, a positive inner world with ourselves. I see it as a spiritual connection. I spend a lot of time every day in prayer and meditation because it builds my resilience, my independence from what's happening in my external world. You all get to figure out how you're going to do this for yourself, but I do encourage working with counselors at our psychological center on Dominguez, because I've had counselors and therapists throughout my life who've really helped me build this capacity. You need to stay centered. Breathing is our friend. Positive, mantras are basically what you say to yourself, to calm yourself, to reassure you. You can tell yourself, I'll get through this, they're not worth it. Whatever you can do to keep yourself calm, grounded, and centered. Now, when I was in law school, this is my story. It was not planned, but I was the only woman. I was part of the generation, and that's not that long ago, when finally they started admitting 50% women to law schools. Before that, they hadn't admitted as many women as men. And when the women were graduating from the very top law schools, Stanford, Harvard, they were getting jobs as legal secretaries, not lawyers. That's not that long ago. So we have made major progress. But I was the only woman in my negotiation class in law school. And so I got to experience the nasty tactics of the men, at least the men in the world who become lawyers. And yeah, they were nasty. I'm not going to share all the things they did to throw me off my center, to throw me off my power. But at that point in my life, I didn't know what to do, because they were doing things as a woman I just wasn't used to having somebody do, right? These are probably locker room kind of things. I just had not experienced this. My brothers and dad had not done these things. So I just stayed quiet. And what I learned is none of the men in my class could tolerate my silence. They would start talking and giving me valuable information. That was an incredible lesson. That if I just stayed silent, some of the men in the room would get nervous and start sharing valuable information. So do what works for you. That's one of the things that works for me. I've talked already about the power of a best alternative to a negotiated agreement. Dr. King and the civil rights movement used our court system. At the time, the U.S. Supreme Court and federal legislation were in their court. That's not true today. So every time we determine our best alternative, we have to be solidly in the real world with what are our options now. I think, our Black leaders decided a social in the streets movement would be more powerful than going to the current conservative U.S. Supreme Court. So you got to strategize. Exploring all your options as you ask yourself what you need, what you want, is always going to help. But when you've got a nasty person, one of the things you can do is to name and verbalize, make explicit what they're trying to do. Oh, it looks like you're trying to force me or push me into this agreement, right? That in and of itself, giving voice to your experience, can disarm them and at least shows them that you're strong enough to speak, to be in the present, and to speak up on your own behalf. Here's what the research shows, and good luck with practicing this. I do live this, and I gotta tell you, it's not easy. What the research shows, and this is what games theorists have been studying, because the economists of the world, they use computers to try to figure out how to create peace in the world, and they normally use carrot and sticks, right? If everybody lives together peacefully, they get to have more money or better jobs or whatever, something nice. Or if they are at war with each other, we'll do economic sanctions. Well, it doesn't always work the way it works in the classroom or in the research study, but they have discovered a negotiation tactic for when you've got somebody who attacks you, is mean or rude to you, disrespectful in some way. They call it forgiveness math. Or they also call it generous tit for tat. You all know what tit for tat is, right? Reciprocity. You disrespect me, I disrespect you, we go down into the mud together. That's tit for tat. Or, random act of kindness. Hopefully I smile at you, you smile at me, and we live happily ever after, right? That's tit for tat. Generous tit for tat is, okay, they're nasty and rude, you don't react, you forgive them the one time. This is a little different than being nasty back to let them know you're not going to take it, right? You forgive them, and then you extend an olive branch. You give them the opportunity to be nice, right? To realize that you both will do better if you both work together in respectful ways, that you're not interested in down spiraling into nastiness, in doing tit for tat. Now, the problem with this is you need an aware, conscious human being who recognizes opportunity. And there's a lot of people in the world today who don't. I was just discussing with someone in our broadcasting studio driving in LA. Road rage, and you got to be on guard. And I tell my husband, don't you dare offend the person next to us. They might have a gun in the glove compartment. You all know this. But some of us try forgiveness math and generous tit for tat as we're driving. We consciously encourage people to go first, right? When they're trying to get in, we allow them. We actually show that we're interested in humanity on the freeways. Now, this may sound a little silly, but I would encourage you to practice this and see how it goes. I'll tell you, in my marriage, practicing forgiveness math and generous tit for tat. I'm in a cross-cultural marriage. We did not grow up in the same cultures. My husband speaks many languages that I will never speak. I'll only understand intuitively. So we can have misunderstanding and feel like there's nastiness when it's not intended, right? So forgiveness math, generous tit for tat probably explains the success and longevity of our marriage, because we both practice it. We both want to make amends and make peace and live together happily. So I'll encourage you, try it out, see how it works for you. Good luck.